G'day Bomber fans, we are continuing our practice match wrap up. On Sunday I brought you an Essendon vs St Kilda review talking about the game and the match and the way that it played out and what it meant for the team in general, and you guys can go back and watch that video if you haven't already. Really, to sum it up, there's not too many negative or positive thoughts being a practice game, but I think when you look at these practice and pre-season games, you look at the individuals and what they're doing, and that is what we're doing today. We are going through the entire 26-man playing squad, talking about each player, the way they played, where they played on the field, and what it means for their round one prospects. It's going to be a longer video, so let's just get right into it. We're going to go in order of jumper number, of course, starting with Andy McGrath, our captain. It was a pretty standard Andy McGrath game, realistically. Like, I thought he was defensively accountable for the most part. I think Jack Higgins might have got a couple of goals late. I don't know if McGrath was his direct opponent at the time because magnets were being flicked around so much it was really hard to keep track. But what I did notice was McGrath accountable in one-on-one contests, whether it be on ground level or in the air. He had the 3 contested one-on-ones in the air and didn't lose a single one of them. I think a couple might have been against Nasiah. And honestly, that's something I noticed is McGrath probably being the only one to really lock down on Wanganeen Merrett when he was playing on him. That's kind of what Andy McGrath does. He's one of the better lockdown defenders in the league, and we've been saying that for years. I think, again, the thing that you're looking at with McGrath, and when you can criticise him, is really what he's doing with the footy. And to be fair, the 19 disposals, 90% efficiency, but a lot of it was by hand. Like 6 kicks for the game is not really enough to talk about disposal efficiency. A lot of that was because the defensive 50 was under immense pressure. I thought St Kilda were applying incredible pressure to our defensive 50 and really forcing us to overhandball at times in that defensive zone, and it was hard to relieve that pressure. But guys like Andy McGrath were really kind of trying to steady the ship down there, and honestly did a pretty good job at times. So honestly, you probably want to see more aggression and direction in his game, but it's a pretty standard Andy McGrath game, really. Like, he didn't let himself down like other senior players did. Yes, it's a practice game, but I thought Andy McGrath, you always need to play well if you're captain, even in the practice games, and I thought he probably looked better than most of the other senior players out there, despite not having, the craziest game or anything. So you'd hope he's playing better footy, come the regular season, and maybe even more inspirational footy at times. But I think the fact that this guy can lock down just so well on some of the better forwards in the competition, it shows just how good he is down back. So I thought it was a pretty reliable and solid Andy McGrath game, nothing more. Jacob Farrow played down back, played on the wing a bit as the game went on, kind of like what we saw against Richmond. He had 11 disposals, 7 intercept possessions, so most of the footy that he was winning was, I guess, in contention, where, coming from a St Kilda boot, and that is I guess it's a positive of sorts, because he's intercepting the footy and showing his defensive nous, which is not something we've really come to appreciate of Jacob Farrow just yet, but this kind of player, you need him to find space and time and win the footy in an uncontested situation, and he only had the 3 kicks for the game. Jacob Farrow, he wasn't able to utilise his biggest strength, which is his left boot. He is such a good kick of the footy, only the 3 again, like that's less than 1 a quarter. Of course, he played out less of the game than most of his teammates as well, which is possibly an indication that of the 26 players out there, he's kind of on the back end of that. Doesn't mean he's not out of round 1 contention, because there were others that played less than him, but it was definitely a quieter game than what we saw last week against the Tigers, where I thought he was really, really impressive. So wet weather footy, I was really interested to see how Jacob Farrow went in these conditions, and probably didn't shine as much as we saw him do last week against the Tigers. So probably a step forward defensively with some of his efforts, but the fact that we didn't see him really use the footy the way that he should be using the footy is definitely something to note for the wet weather games in the future. Darcy Parish was brilliant last week against the Tigers. He was just about our best player last week against Richmond. This week we saw kind of the other Darcy Parish, and it's really funny how things can change in a week, because last week all the comments are saying Darcy Parish is back, 2021 Darcy Parish returns. This week you've got the opposite, the fans who are looking at the 2023, 2024 Darcy Parish, and maybe he's returning. And to be honest, pre-season games, you can't read into either of these performances too much. I think the fact that we've seen both versions of Darcy Parish is, it's not a good thing, because really you want to see them in form the whole way through, but our whole midfield was down in the dumps, and Darcy Parish was a big member of that midfield who was definitely down in the dumps. He wasn't winning the footy as well as he would have liked. He was still, applying that clearance winning ability in contested situations, but it was more so the fact that he was struggling to get to contest and implement himself in open play that was really probably a bit worrying, because those are criticisms that you've had of Darcy Parish in the past. So the fact that you had that kind of creep into his game it's a practice game, so you can't read too much into it, but these are criticisms, that kind of that sloppy, slow Darcy Parish that we saw at times in 2024 when he was playing. It's just interesting because it came a week after the 2021 Darcy Parish, so hopefully it is just preseason rust. We can't read too much into these performances being a preseason game, and the fact that you can kind of pin it down to maybe a lack of intent and effort is a sign that it's a preseason game. But we saw how good he looked last week against the Tigers. He's definitely playing round one against Hawthorn, but if he's playing the way he did in this game against the Hawks, it'd be a bit of a worry. Kyle Langford, I think he's probably best on ground for me. Kyle Langford, I thought he was fantastic pretty much the whole way through the game, and of the senior players, he really was the one just leading the way wherever he could, and it was in the forward line predominantly, or pretty much the whole game. But 20 disposals, 2 goals, a team high 10 score involvement, so he was, half of his disposals led to scores, which is really promising. I thought he provided a really good bridging piece in transition when the ball was in open play, and when it wasn't, when he was a contested situation up forward, he was not only the one that took the most marks inside 50, but also the most contested marks for the team. So he's not really seen as a contested marker. He's usually someone who marks out on a lead, which is really hard to do against St Kilda, and that's why it's kind of funny, because if you're looking at the key forwards that we had, Kyle Langford, if you're looking history-wise, historically, the way he plays is not the way to get on top of a St Kilda defence. They flood numbers back, they plug holes really well, they make it so you can't take marks out on the lead, but it was still that player who does that was finding the most footy inside 50 in a different way. So it was really interesting seeing Kyle Langford able to impact the game despite it probably not being his conditions and the way that he would like it being played. And maybe that's because Cal Wilkie went down and magnets got flicked around, but I thought he looked really good after a really impressive performance last week against the Tigers as well, and he's looking primed for a genuinely a big 2026 season. And fingers crossed, obviously we just don't want this guy to come off the park again with injuries, because he was looking good early last season as well, but he's built into this preseason really well. I was very impressed with what I saw. If we're giving out votes for the preseason game, this guy's getting all 3. Jye Caldwell, he was probably another senior player that let himself down. I don't know. It's really tough to, be too harsh on players in these preseason games, but he was probably below his best, we'll say. And I thought the whole midfield really struggled to contain St Kilda's best players. Jye Caldwell is usually someone who is very good at containing the opposition's best players, and he really, the fact that Winhager got off the leash, Sinclair, Naz got off the leash, and there was no intent to stop them, really shows the direction that the team was kind of going with for this game, and the fact that they weren't fussed about the result at all. So in another world, maybe in a regular season game, this guy's having more of an impact because we're trying to stop those players, but he wasn't really trying. And I think the fact that he wasn't trying and he wasn't involved defensively as much probably showed, that he's not the best outside midfielder going around. We really like him for his grunt and attack on the footy, or I guess attack on the man inside the coalface. To be fair, he had the 8 tackles, 5 clearances. He was doing his best work in close and personal, but he wasn't really covering the ground well enough to stem their offense, and he wasn't really providing us enough to, in our offense. So yeah, I thought he probably wasn't trying his hardest, I'd say, and I reckon he'd admit that. It's a preseason game, he wouldn't be. It's not a huge negative, but again, if this was a regular season game, I'd probably be pretty disappointed by his efforts. This is the kind of performance in many ways that reminds you of the lack of stakes in a game like this. I've talked about the intent, not only from Caldwell, but the team not to put a tagging role on anyone. I think Caldwell's performance, I've got no doubts that he's going to be determined and focused come round 1, because that is Jye Caldwell when he's playing footy that matters. But again, this game doesn't matter. There were some positive signs here and there, but for the most part, a lot of half efforts, and I guess shows that it's a preseason game. Zach Merrett, talk about trial and error. This guy was genuinely playing everywhere. He played in all 3 zones. He played a decent amount in the midfield kind of early-ish, and featured in just under half of the centre bounces that the team took part in. And in the midfield, he kind of looked the usual Zach Merrett that we've come to expect, although wasn't in it enough to really get that proper sample size of Zach Merrett midfield, because of course he missed the Richmond game with State of Origin. So that's going to be interesting seeing just how much midfield minutes he plays in round 1 against Hawthorn. But it was really the other 2 zones that were probably the most interesting, because I thought he did some really good things down back, and he was kind of the sweeper or the quarterback at times, just setting up the play with that left boot, a lot of short little kicks to kind of open up space and change the angles a bit in that deepest defensive zone. up the field when he was playing kind of honestly like a key forward, that is what I didn't get as much, because I think we kind of saw that role played in State of Origin where he wasn't the deepest forward, but he was deep in the forward line, kind of acting as a crumbing little forward who could also distribute the footy and find targets inside 50, but that wasn't really the role that Merrett was playing in this game a lot of the time for Essendon. A lot of the time he was the genuine deepest forward, used as a marking target, which is, I mean, how many times do you see Zach Merrett take contested marks in a game, especially, like, let alone in the wet? So I don't know what the thought process was there with Zach Merrett. It was definitely trial and error, but I think if I'm looking at Zach Merrett in the forward line, it's not to be that kind of end result, end product kind of player, the one going for goals. He's doing his best work entering 50, kind of up the field a little bit, finding those deepest forwards, and he wasn't able to do that. He wasn't able to win the footy when playing in the forward line. I was surprised that he got the 21 touches, because there were periods of this game where he was on the field but absolutely shut out, doing nothing in that forward half. So really interesting game. I think I don't think it's his fault that he was kind of in and out of the game. I think it was definitely coaching, and I'm not blaming the coaching for that, because it was trial and error. We were trialing him in a bunch of different positions, but I don't know. I hope we don't see that role too much this year, because I don't really see it working out. I think I like him in the forward half, but it's more that State of Origin type player where he's kind of, helping, be that, not that end result, that end piece of the puzzle, but kind of bridge that end piece of the puzzle and find those targets inside 50, because we didn't really see that at all with Zach Merrett. Brayden Fiorini, if we're giving out votes, he would be right near the top. He was one of our better players out on that wing, and this is the kind of footy we can expect from Brayden Fiorini. You see this guy pop up in the deepest line of defence. You see him pop up in the deepest line in the forward line as well. He works so hard to get both up and back. It is really impressive watching him play. It's not just that leadership and that kind of that not classy ball use, but that stable ball use that you have around the ground, which is really handy out on a wing. But it's that work rate to both offensively and defensively that I really, really love. And again, we saw him pepper the scoreboard. Like, this guy gets opportunities inside 50. We saw that in training. In intra-club games, he was kicking 3 or 4 goals a game sometimes. Last week against the Tigers, 3 behinds, 3 shots on goal, but 3 behinds. Kicks his first goal for the club in an unofficial hit-out. 1 goal, 1, but that's still 5 shots in the last 2 games, and I don't know how many forwards would have that output in the last 2 games, let alone wingmen. So that's good. I think it's the opportunities that are more pleasing than anything. Even if you kick the 2 behinds, it's still 5 shots on goal in the last couple of games, which is really, really pleasing, because he's also helping out in defence. So Brayden Fiorini already looking like a gem of a signing, to be honest. He's not only providing leadership and stability out on that wing, but he's providing both offensively and defensively as well, which you really, really love to see. I thought Fiorini was definitely one of our better players. Dyson Sharp, I almost think this is just about the story of the game for me. Dyson Sharp, I thought he was absolutely fantastic, and it's 15 touches. What is it? 15 touches, 8 kicks, not a single tackle. But when you look at that, it doesn't look like anything that special. But it's those little half efforts that you see from Dyson Sharp that are so pleasing, and it's just his coverage around the ground. Like, this guy was involved all over the field, in between the arcs mostly, yes, but the work rate to get up and back, to involve himself in a defensive play, in a defensive chain, and then find the footy in forward 50 as well. It is really pleasing to see him play like that, because I wasn't sure that we'd be able to see it. Like, I think it's pretty clear this guy isn't the quickest or most athletic player. He is not the fittest player on the list either, but the fact that he works so hard and tries so hard for the team that is exactly what we've come to expect watching Dyson Sharp playing in his junior footy. I think he's just about a lock for round 1 now. I was unsure after the Richmond game, because I didn't love his forward flank footy, but we saw a great deal of it here. He only had the 1 centre bounce attendance for the game, by the way. He was playing predominantly in that forward half, moving up to stoppages once the ball had been thrown up, but I thought he patrolled the arcs absolutely beautifully. He understood the game so well, understood what he needed to do, and really attacked the footy just with ferocity that you wouldn't expect from an 18-year-old. This guy's physicality, we know it's next level, but seeing him go up against guys like Rowan Marshall and keep his feet while being tackled that is awesome. This is the type of footy we should be expecting from Dyson Sharp this year. I'm not expecting 30 disposal games and 3 goals. I'm not expecting the classiest footy by foot, but he just does the right things kind of in the wrong ways at times. Like, even the kick to Kyle Langford for that goal, it wasn't the perfect drop punt. He kind of got the footy, put it on the boot straight away, but it's the fact that he put it in the right area to a player player's advantage. It doesn't need to be lace out on his chest. It doesn't need to be the perfect drop punt. He just knows to put it in the right area and lets Kyle Langford do the rest. And that is exactly what Dyson Sharp does. It's not pretty, he doesn't really have a highlights reel from this game, to be honest, but it's a lot of really hard work that goes unnoticed a lot of the time to viewers, but the teammates would love it. I said in the review before that on Sunday that it's kind of inspirational the way that he plays, because he really isn't the most gifted footballer, if you look at his draft profile or his player profile overall, but he just battles so hard. So yeah, really impressed with Dyson Sharp. This is exactly the footy we should be expecting from him this year. Archie Perkins, he played the second half. He's obviously been returning from that groin injury, and he played in that, that forward flank kind of moving up to stoppage role that we've come to expect, where he is predominantly in the forward half. I thought he was rusty, and that is to be expected. He's missed most of the preseason with that groin complaint, but even some of his big strengths that you come to expect from Archie Perkins were definitely almost weaknesses in this game, and that is a sign of rust more than anything. Like the fact that he was struggling to hold up in tackles a little bit, that is a sign of rust. This is his first competitive hit out. I don't even know if he's really played much practice games for the Bombers in intra-club. So, the kind of struggling to hold up in tackles with those strong hips, that is something that we'll see changed, when he starts playing more regular footy with minutes under the belt. We saw that direct kicking going inside 50, and that is something that's always been really a strong suit of Archie Perkins' game. He just knows where to put the footy for those key forwards. He had a really good kick inside 50 from the wing. I think it was like a 40 or 50 metre kick straight to Kyle Langford's advantage, or it might have been Archie May's advantage. It was someone's advantage inside forward 50, but it was very Archie Perkins. This was kind of a very Archie Perkins half a footy. He had the 6 disposals, some really great moments that you just know, you can expect from Archie Perkins in a game. He kind of always stands up for 1 or 2 great moments in a game, but definitely signs of rust as well. And I think, by the way, the fact that he played out half the game with returning from that groin, not in the VFL, is definitely an indication that this guy, when fully fit, is going to be in the frame to play in the AFL side. So I think we should expect to see a little bit of Archie Perkins early in the season. Peter Wright, his stats obviously don't look amazing. He had just the 7 disposals, the 2 marks, but I thought despite the stats not, kind of jumping out at you, he probably had a pretty decent game, to be honest. I thought, this guy's playing multiple roles. It was very much what we saw last week against the Tigers, where he's doing his bit up forward, he's productive in front of goals, kicked 2 goals, 1 from outside 50 was an absolute beauty. He's got his set shot groove back. Last year we saw that he was probably struggling to hit the target inside 50 and kick the goal, which is not something you often associate with Peter Wright, but he's definitely been on song this preseason, not only in practice, in training, but in these games as well. I really liked his ruck contribution, though. I think this is, against St Kilda, which is just about the best 1-2 ruck duo in the league with De Koning and Rowan Marshall. This guy had less ruck contests than Marshall, but more hitouts. And he was actually allowing Blakiston to kind of fill back and plug a hole in defence, which is what Blakiston will do a lot this year, kind of acting as that 4th key defender. Wright was rucking a lot on the wings, in between the arcs, which is kind of what you need from a player like Peter Wright, who's got that natural size. So the fact that we saw this guy productive in the forward line, kick multiple goals, but also in the ruck as well, getting to contests, I think that is really important. I don't think he was amazing or even played that well out there, but this is kind of, it's almost bare minimum stuff where he's making the most of his chances. He's productive in the ruck. I mean, less footy than you'd expect from a player like Peter Wright. I guess the conditions didn't suit him much either, but I honestly, I was pretty impressed. He didn't even play that much footy either, 60% game time. So definitely a decent performance from Peter Wright. Archie Roberts played a lot of midfield, and I was interested to see how much midfield he'd play with Zach Merrett returning, but he ran through the guts more than Merrett did. So something to note. I don't know if that's going to be the case in round 1 against the Hawks, but he is running through the midfield, and definitely you can see why he's an option there, because he does provide more defensive stability and assurance than his teammates at times, and that's because of his gut running ability. Like, he can just get to contests and stoppages a lot better than some others around him. He really works and runs harder than his teammates a lot of the time, and he wins so much of the footy for that reason. That is why he had the 29 disposals, the most of any Essendon player on the ground. I think the main talking point is probably his foot skills, because he did turn over the footy a few times, a few unforced errors, kicking it out on the full here and there. That is kind of Archie Roberts. Like, he's so tidy at his best, and so, I guess, confident at his best by foot, but sometimes that confidence seeps through a little bit and it becomes overconfidence and he turns it over, and then it becomes the opposite where he might go into his shell for a minute or two. So it's definitely something to note. He does need to improve his foot skills. There's no questioning that. You can defend him for his age, and I do. I think with time he will improve his foot skills, but it is something he does need to work on. Something else he does need to work on is his aggression. I think this guy is one of the main culprits for giving away free kicks, and there was one downfield free kick that I really didn't like. It was unnecessary, kind of pushing a player over as they kicked the footy, and allowed St Kilda to have a set shot inside 50. So he needs to improve in his aggression. Like, he's a really tough player, really competitive, and I noticed this when interviewing him. Like, he looked competitive while I was chatting to him one-on-one. You just got that vibe about him that he just wants to win whatever he's doing. But when it's on the footy field and things aren't going his way, he lets that aggression seep through. If he gives away a free kick, he argues with the umpire. I think that's something he can definitely work on, and again, he will with time. This guy is only 21 years of age, one of our younger players on the list, but the fact that he's winning so much of the footy and honestly was arguably our best player, he'd be in the votes as well. Massive signs for a player coming off that second place finished in the Crichton. He is still developing, which is really promising because he's already playing so well. Sam Durham, he was always going to be an interesting one. He had that rolled ankle last week. He was training with the non-contact cap on, which suggests that you don't want players, tackling you because you might be carrying an injury or something. So there were talks about him not even getting up for this game, not official talks or anything, but some questioning whether he'd be right to play in this game with that rolled ankle from last week. He only played half a footy against the Tigers last week, but he got up to this game. He played out most of it, or a good deal of it, same amount as the other midfielders. I'd say he was below his best though. Same with Caldwell. He did a lot right in the contest, but he was clearly part of a poorer midfield in there. He struggled to stay in the game and keep up with the momentum and keep up with the Saints midfielders. There was a lot of really good tackling in close and personal when the ball was congested, and there was a lot of congestion in this game, a lot of opportunities to tackle opponents. So the fact that he has the 8 tackles like Caldwell did, it's a bit deceiving, because Dyson Sharp I thought had a lot of physicality too and only the 0 tackles. So those stats can be deceiving if you're a midfielder playing inside the coalface, winning at stoppages where we had extra numbers as well, by the way. But yeah, he left holes in space and couldn't really provide going forward. So definitely needs to be better in the regular season. I think he will be better in the regular season. Again, same with Caldwell. I think this is more of an issue with intent more than anything. And if that's the case in a preseason game, that is fine. It's only an issue if it really seeps through to the regular season. Sorry, actually, just touching on Sam Durham because I forgot to discuss this. I am recording this video on Sunday night, so I'm yet to see the MRO results. I don't know if he's been suspended or not, and even now it's hard to really know whether he's going to be suspended. I can never really tell, but even the fact that we're discussing this and that it's an option, I said this in my review video when I talked about the team as a whole, but I just don't like that. I think you should be, as a senior player especially, you should be better and know better with the rules in place to not be that aggressive when tackling, especially in a preseason game. I think if this was in a regular season game, we could probably argue the rules a bit more and whether or not it is fair that he's going to be suspended or not. But if this is a preseason game and we're arguing that, that is more on Sam Durham. Fool me once, shame on you, like we saw last year with his suspension, but fool me twice, it's shame on me. And this guy has been involved in a few MRO conversations and discussions over the years. He plays on the edge, he plays tough. I love that in the regular season, in the home and away. If he's suspended for round 1, that is completely on him. Jaxon Prior is a really tough one to read. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure how I feel about this wing role, to be honest. I am not convinced. I'm not convinced that Jaxon Prior is the right man to be on the wing. And look, I thought he was really solid against Richmond, but I said in that video that, against a Richmond wing duo with, first, second year players, sure, he can hold up defensively there, but it's going to be tested against better wingmen, and we saw that against the Saints. They've got some decent wingmen, so do Hawthorn, and I thought, I just didn't see Jaxon Prior wow me enough, or even just instill me with any confidence that he could hold up for a full season on the wing. I like Jaxon Prior in the squad. I've always liked him as a squad depth player, and the fact that he can play wing is good for depth, but this shouldn't be the first option. And I think the fact that it is the first option is probably worrying and says more about our wing stocks than Jaxon Prior. We can't be too mad at Jaxon Prior for underperforming on the wing if it's not his most natural role. I don't think he's got that natural athleticism and speed required to play wing footy. I think he's got toughness, and he showed that 7 tackles, and using the footy by foot a lot, which is good as well. But just times where he's getting lost, his opponents are running out from the back of him. I think the Saints had active wingers. I thought we only had one active winger, and it was Brayden Fiorini. I think Fiorini needs help on that other side to share the load, and I don't know if Prior is the man to be helping him. So I get that he's played wing before at Brisbane. I just don't think it really works in this Essendon system when there are less quality players around you than there would be in a Brisbane. And I'm not convinced that he's going to be good enough to contain the likes of Josh Weddle and Massimo D'Ambrosio. I just don't think he's going to be able to do that personally. It is still very early. And again, we shouldn't be judging players based on preseason games, but you see the signs, you see on paper, it just hasn't made sense to me the whole way through, and I haven't been convinced yet that, he hasn't convinced me yet that he's the right man for the wing. Maybe he'll do that in the regular season, but I don't know. Archer May, not a whole lot to discuss. He came on in the last quarter, touched the footy 3 times. 2 of those touches were goals, so fair play. I think the fact that he managed to hit the scoreboard and have an impact with limited amounts of footy is positive. And yes, by that stage, the game had really opened up, and defensively, both teams were leaky, probably because just the lack of leg speed. So this guy with fresher legs was always going to impact where he could, and that's what I felt with other players that came on late as well. But I think this game tells me 2 things. I think it tells me, 1, he's not quite in the frame for round 1. I think if he was, he would have played more footy than he did. Like, if you come on for the last quarter of a practice game, it is a good indication that you're not quite in that best 23, and I don't think Archer May is quite in that best 23 yet, and I don't know what the makeup for him is. Yes, he can, kind of go to ruck contests, but he doesn't really do too much in them yet, and that will change with time. He will develop, Peter Wright will aid him and teach him there, but at the moment, he's a key forward who can cover. He found space well, converts his chances, but you don't see it enough when it really matters in these practice games. I don't think I've really seen Archer May in these practice games. The 2 that we've seen really show that he's a solidified round 1 option yet. We've seen signs for the future and signs that are promising that also indicate he can play footy this year, and probably likely will play footy this year. I think he's not in the round 1 frame, but right on the outer in that emergencies list. But yeah, I don't think he's going to play against Hawthorn, Archer May. But the fact that he's come on for a quarter, kicked 2 goals, that is very good. That's all you really need. That is positive signs from limited footy. Mason Redman, I thought defensively he was sound. I actually really liked his attack on the footy and the contest a lot of the time. He had some really strong marking contests and came off second best in 1 or 2 of them. He put his body on the line a lot more than some of his teammates, which is what you'd expect from a vice captain. But the fact that he's doing it in a preseason game is, it's a positive that he didn't get injured. If he's getting injured, maybe we're talking about it as a negative, but the fact that he's fit and healthy and still putting his body on the line for the team is always good. So that is a positive. He was defensively, I would say, stable and sound. My main issue, and I don't know if this is Mason Redman or the coaching, is the fact that he didn't really find any of the footy up the field. And in a game like this, where St Kilda are flooding numbers back in D50 and plugging holes, this would be a perfect game to have Mason Redman kind of patrolling the forward 50 and almost just going for goal from 55, 60 out. Like, we're not finding marks inside 50 anyway. Even if he's not going for goal, he can provide serious punch with his ball use and get distance going inside 50 to find deep targets or try and find deep targets. But he only had the 1 inside 50 for the game. So I don't know if that was a directive, because he did have the 12 kicks, but most of them were in that back 50. I think pretty much all of them were in that back 50, just rebounding out of there. I think he had the most rebounds for the team as well, or him or Zak Johnson. So yeah, had no impact going forward. I felt, I don't know if that's Redmond. I don't know if it's the coaching. It's always really hard to know in these games. But Mason Redmond at his best is really tough and reliable defensively, but also really punchy and providing drive going forward. And I don't know if it's the fact that we don't have numbers around him, for him to leave defensive 50 too much, because realistically, if Mason Redmond leaves that zone, Andy McGrath is the only guy over 21 or 22 years of age there on ground level. So yeah, I feel like most of the footy he won was in defensive 50 or in high pressure situations. But for what he did, I thought he held up pretty well. Xavier Duursma, I'm not trying to be rude here, but I don't don't remember seeing him out on the field much at all. I think I might have... one of my notes was that he was in defensive 50 at one stage, lining up there, not even, just finding his way there. But I think after a goal, he might have found himself starting in defensive 50. So I don't know if that was just magnets being flicked around. It probably was, because they were being flicked around unbelievably often in this game. But the guy had 4 disposals, came off at halftime, 42% game time. I just really didn't see him play much. I think he had a set shot, I remember that, and it wasn't too far off. But aside from that, I can't really remember too much of what Xavier Duursma did. So, I mean, look, I don't mind the forward experiment for him. I think the half that annoys me or worries me more is Jaxon Prior on the wing, but really I think this guy is just a wingman and he should be playing on the wing instead of Jaxon Prior. That is my 2 cents. I know that probably Brad Scott and the coaches disagree with me there, but I think this guy is just too natural a wingman and too good running back defensively to not be on the wing. My boy Max Kondogiannis. This was a really interesting watch because this guy is well and truly in the round 1 conversation. He's been training with the A team. Andy McGrath's been hyping him up on live radio. I thought he was holding back a lot in early in the game. Like, there were times where the ball would be bubbling around and he'd be waiting for his teammate to collect it instead, even though he'd be in the better position for it. There was even one instance where he's trying to fumble the ball professionally over the boundary instead of collect it when he had time to collect it. So I thought early in the game he was holding back, and I was a bit worried to see that because he looked so good against Richmond and didn't have that confidence, maybe with the wet weather footy, to really play with his, I guess, that flair that we saw against the Tigers. Maybe it's because they're also on a harder forward line against St Kilda, and to be fair, this guy did play on Nasiah Wanganeen-Millera for portions of this game, and obviously Nasiah got the better of him, which is to be expected. He's 18, but just that experience alone is great for Max. But I think as the game went on, he really settled into the game and found himself in it. And yes, he only had the 9 disposals, but there were some little moments in this game that I absolutely loved. He had one amazing moment that summed him up absolutely perfectly, and it didn't even look amazing because he did it with such ease and such composure, but the ball was bouncing, going towards Essendon's defensive 50. He was the last player back, chasing the footy. Nasiah was behind him. He collected the footy on ground level, saw Nasiah coming towards him, kind of took him on a little bit, ran a little bit of an arc, and then nailed a kick, not to space or anything, not to an outlet, but inside the corridor to a tough player in a really compromising position, I guess, if the ball is turned over. But he nails the kick and it sets a play up going the other way. It was the most Max Kondogiannis play ever, where he's reliable and composure, driven with the footy in the defensive half, but still has that aggression to go through the corridor. It was really great. It was really impressive. I actually... Only 9 disposals, but as the game went on, this guy seemed to find himself involved more, do some really nice things. The weather probably didn't suit him much, those early drizzle and just the wetness and the skiddiness of the footy, but I think this guy... I don't know. I think he might play round 1. I really wouldn't be surprised at all. I think we're going to have a few debutants in round 1, and I wouldn't be surprised if this guy is one of them, especially with Jordan Ridley missing. I don't think he's going to set the world alight or anything like that, but I seriously think he is in the conversation to play round 1 footy, and if he doesn't, he's probably going to be on the emergencies anyway. So just the 9 disposals, but I think of the draftees, after Dyson Sharp, who was hands down the best of the draftees, I'd say Max Kondogiannis takes the chocolates after that. Nate Caddy, he was one of our better players last week, kicked the 4 goals. This week it was a bit tougher on tougher defenders, so that St Kilda backline is really hard to find space in, and Nate Caddy is a player who loves to run and leap at the footy, and it was really frustrating, I think, for him, because he wasn't getting the opportunity to do so when the footy was in good areas, and then when it wasn't in good areas and it was kicked up on his head, he was kind of overrunning it and putting himself in bad positions on his own doing. So I think it was kind of a 50-50 game where the footy was coming in pretty badly for him, with that St Kilda defence, but he was also himself kind of contributing to that with some of his, like I think we all know that he can kind of have the ability to run under the footy a bit and attack it with almost too much aggression and too much speed, where his opponent can kind of sit back and just read the footy and have that more composure with their age, I guess. So it wasn't the greatest game from Nate Caddy. Still had chances on goal, kicked a goal, 2 behinds, even the goal, by the way, like that was, I think, it might have been Caminiti who really just muscled him out of the contest. Nate Caddy was in a weird position. Caminiti muscles him out of the contest, drops the mark. Caddy reads the crumb. Like, it was kind of luck. He was out of position in that marking contest and the ball just fell to him, luckily, and he finished and pounced on the goal. But yeah, I'd say not the best game from Nate Caddy. He was trying and he was getting his hands on the footy and using it by foot going inside 50, which is really important because that's what you want from Nate Caddy. He was probably at his best kind of around around that 70 to 80 mark, putting the ball inside 50, but yeah, didn't have the impact that he had last week. Zachary Reid, so it was kind of a little switch up in roles. Last week he was that main defender while McKay was kind of able to intercept down the line. A lot of what McKay was doing last week with his intercepting was kind of Richmond kicks down the line, and he was out muscling his opponent and intercept marking, and McKay was really good last week, but this week Zach Reid was more of that kind of, like sweeper keeper role where he's intercepting in different ranges and areas. He was let off the leash a little bit because McKay was playing on Marshall, but I think with Reid, his intercepting range is just so strong. Like, he's not only able to do what McKay does in a one-on-one and intercept in that situation, but he's also athletic and quick enough to intercept the ball, not only at his highest point, but in tougher marking conditions. You know, he had a few really good chest marks that were just hard to hold. You know, when a chest mark is bubbling about in the air and Zachary just holds them and kind of gets off and goes. I don't remember him getting off and going as much in the conditions, but he was intercepting as we saw last year he did. So that was good. There was a clear direction to win the footy in the air, which we didn't see last week. And I think looking at this Essendon team, if you've got both those defenders working together with Jordan Ridley, the best setup is always allowing Zach Reid to have more freedom than the other two, because this guy just knows how to intercept the footy, knows how to use the footy as well. I thought he played very well. And then to the other part of the duo, Ben McKay. Like, I thought he started the game really well. There was a spoil in the opening minutes on Rowan Marshall where he was behind him. The ball was a really tough one to spoil, but he got a fist in, a really good fist, and this was, you know, going off a really impressive performance last week against Richmond, where I honestly thought he was in the votes last week against the Tigers. I thought he was one of our best players. Then the very next marking contest that he's involved in, he goes again with that clear directive to spoil, fluffs the spoil. Marshall on ground level picks up the footy and I think sets up a goal or a set shot for St Kilda. And I don't know if that knocked his confidence. I don't know what happened, but from then on, it was just like a timid Ben McKay. And there were times last year where Ben McKay was too timid in the air and not assertive enough. And I thought he was assertive to start this game, but as it went on, he just lacked it. And even guys like Mitch Owens were just outsmarting Ben McKay, which shouldn't be the case. Like, he only had the one defensive one-on-one loss, but there were many times where it was almost an uncontested mark for his opponent because he kind of looked for body contact instead of reading the footy in the air, and that's kind of Ben McKay at his worst when he's not reading the footy in the air. We saw him do it perfectly last week against the Tigers. He was one of our best players last week against the Tigers, but I mean, he didn't touch the footy in the first half despite the ball being down there so much, and that is, like, I know you shouldn't be judging key defenders on their disposals and what they do with the footy, but this guy should be intercepting more than he does. He should be accountable for his direct opponent more than he is, and he really wasn't in this game. He had a few goals kicked on him or a few marks taken on him that led to goals. I thought he needs to be a lot better than that. And I've been one that defends Ben McKay in the past for his footy, and this game in particular doesn't mean too much being a preseason game. I personally took more from the last week game against Richmond, but if he's playing like this, like we saw him play at times last year, we are in for a very long season if Jordan Ridley is not back as well. That's the main worry for me, because we have two fit key defenders right now, or three if you count Kale Durine, but he's not going to play in the key defensive zone. Ben McKay and Zach Reid need to work in tandem together. And in these last two practice games, yes, they're practice games, but we haven't seen both of them play good footy at the same time. I thought Reid was below his best last week when McKay was on form. This week when Reid is playing really good footy, McKay is well below his best. I thought he was very timid, didn't really get anything going, to be honest, in the air. It was honestly disappointing after last week. But again, we move on to Hawthorn. He's typically played really well against the Hawks. I remember his first game against Hawthorn. When he joined the club, he was one of our better players. So hopefully he finds that form again that we saw against the Tigers, and he's stronger and more assertive in the air, because he's had a really good preseason, this guy. Like, it's a bit of a shock performance to see him so timid in the air. And I'll say a lot of what he did around the ground was genuinely good, and you can tell because when players avoid long kicks down the line, it's because Ben McKay sat there, but far too many times in contests that matters, he wasn't at his best. So let's hope that he is at his best against the Hawks. Hussien El Achkar, really lively to start the game. He kind of, picked up where he left off last week with that hustle inside 50, kind of, if he's not gathering the ground level footy, he is making it hard for St Kilda to effectively gather it themselves. He had a few opportunities inside 50, kicked a lovely, I love that goal, by the way. That is such a small forward goal, and that's really what we've come to expect from Huss, where he gets those opportunities inside 50, doesn't always take them, but he's getting those opportunities on ground level, that's probably what's going to force his way into the team come round one. I think as the game went on, he slowed down a little bit, or actually quite a lot, to be honest. He went missing a little bit as the game went on. A few reasons for that. I mean, one, he is the only small forward playing in this team at the moment. There is no Isaac Kako. We dropped Gresham and Guelphy, so the only recognised genuine small forward in this lineup was Hussien El Achkar, who has played not a single game of AFL footy yet. That has to be noted. Also, Ramadan. The fact that this guy's playing afternoon footy, he doesn't get to drink water, doesn't get to eat. I mean, it was even more impressive last week in 31-degree heat, but again, like, I can't even get up and go to the fridge without taking a gulp of water. After every player I talk about here, I have to take a gulp or a bite of something. And Hussien playing AFL footy, we talked about his fitness being maybe an issue to start the year anyway. The fact he is doing as well as he is this preseason is absolutely amazing. I think he's probably going to play round one, and I really didn't expect that when we drafted him. I really could not have expected that. I expected him to play footy at some stage, but the fact he is so just almost locked in this team for round one is unbelievably impressive. This guy has had an incredible preseason from where he's come from, taken late in the draft, fitness being a bit of a concern to start, during Ramadan playing these games of footy. Like, what an absolute legend. And I haven't seen that documentary yet. I've had a few people talk about it, but there was apparently a really good documentary on ABC about Huss and Suede together and their draft journey. So I'm keen to see that, because this guy is becoming, really quickly one of my favourite players. And just for the guys who haven't seen him play with Isaac Kako yet, that's going to be exciting. When Isaac Kako returns and these two are together in the same forward line, that is going to be when we really start talking about them as serious players, because the way they link up and the chemistry they have is exceptional. So get keen for that. Get keen for Huss. I think he's had an awesome preseason. Angus Clarke. Probably, I think when you start the game with opportunities to impact and implement yourself in the game, in the contest somehow, and you don't, that can always lead to a bit of a poorer game. And I know, because, you play footy and you have those moments where you drop those chest marks like Angus Clarke did. He had, I think, 2 or 3 opportunities early to touch the footy, to find it, get his hands on it and impact the game in somehow. He wasn't able to do it in any of those moments. And then he went through a bit of a quarter where he wasn't really sighted. And that's where, you're not only not finding the footy, but you're not making the most of it when you do find it. That can really hit your confidence. And I think this has been a preseason maybe where Clarke has lacked confidence a little bit. He hasn't had the greatest preseason. I thought he was great last week and really showed attack on the footy last week. He had that attack on the footy early this week as well, but it didn't go the right way. And then as the game went on, he was involved less and less. Only the 9 disposals. Had some good moments still. I liked his hustle and I liked his soccer goal. He had a really nice a team goal finished off by Clarke in the end, where he just kind of made the most of an opportunistic situation. That is a very Angus Clarke play, but definitely not the best game from Angus Clarke. I'd still say he's in that round one team. He's just not playing the best footy right now, which is, to be fair, in this game, most of the team wasn't playing the best footy. Someone who was playing their best footy is Zak Johnson. I thought this guy was this guy's had a really good preseason. And the great thing is, I've talked about this so much on the channel, and I'm sorry if you've heard this a lot, but this guy was a week off being drafted in last year's draft. He was the youngest player in the competition last year. Didn't have a preseason last year with that shoulder injury. This is his first ever AFL preseason where he's actually out on the park playing practice games. And in both of these games, he has really shown just how good he can be at the level. And I think this is probably, of all the games I've seen Zak Johnson play, his most impressive. Even that Geelong game in the regular season last year, he was getting lots of the footy, but in this game he was intercepting, he was defending. He had a game high 9 intercepts, that is team high and game high. He was really strong defensively and attacking the footy. He rarely made mistakes. 24 disposals, 7 score involvements, by the way, as well. So 9 intercepts, 7 involvements. It means he is not only involved defensively, but offensively too. This was probably, all the players in this team, maybe aside from Langford, the most rounded performance. And to be honest, I'd probably give him the 2 votes behind Kyle Langford if I'm being real. I thought he was one of our very best players out on the park, doing some really, really good things with ball in hand. He is a seriously good distributor, a good user. You can really trust him with the footy. That's the thing. Like, even times where he was kind of edging off his opponent, well, not like that. There were times where he was like one-on-one with his opponent and beating him in, I was about to say something even worse. There were times where he was one-on-one with his opponent, kind of got the footy on ground level, collected and had the composure not only to just use the footy, but get that meterage away from his opponent to use the footy. It is, I mean, this guy has to play round 1. And if we're talking about who misses out, it honestly might be Jacob Farrow at this stage. Like, I think Zak Johnson and Farrow are pretty tied for spots in who features in that defensive zone. But Zak Johnson, he's the one really impressing this preseason. He had the second most disposals for the Bombers, most intercepts, up there with the most involvements as well. It was such a rounded, probably the most rounded game I've ever seen Zak Johnson play. So this was really, really impressive. I thought he was brilliant. Saad El-Hawli, he only played the 1 quarter. Like with Archie, it's probably an indication that they're further away from the round 1 team than others that played more minutes in this game. He looked solid enough when he was on the field. He had the fresher legs. He had some strong marking contests to start and some strong defensive situations. I think he had 4 disposals and 3 of them were intercepts. So there you go. He was defending when he was on the field. He was contributing when he was on the field, which is all you can really do if you come in there with limited minutes. It is very hard for a player to come on late in a game and impact. Even if you've got fresher legs, it is still hard to kind of find the pacing of the game. Yes, it slowed down a bit, but I thought Saad found the pacing really well and impacted and contributed while he was out there. So yeah, I actually really liked his caught up. I think he slipped in seamlessly, and he is obviously one of the next in kind of players to start the year. Jayden Nguyen, this guy was an absolute delight to watch, and he just always is a delight to watch, to be honest. Jayden Nguyen, like, it is so good watching him play footy. It is so fun. He's got to be one of the most, like, he just brings a smile to your face when you see him out there because he just battles so hard. I thought he was awesome in this game, to be honest. I thought he was really good defensively. He was probably on ground level the most accountable defender, and to be fair, a lot of the time he had lesser matchups than those around him, but he was still throwing his body around as he always does. Defending was his first priority, but something we talked about in the preseason was him having to find the footy more to start AFL games and be involved in the AFL. 15 disposals, I think. Was it 15? 15 disposals in this game, 8 by foot, using the footy really nicely as well. Like he is improving. This guy's improving defensively. He's improving with ball in hand, starting to take the game on, which I really, really like. Not just with his aggression and his defensive intent, but he is starting to take on players and use the footy, which we didn't see in the AFL. We saw kind of a defense-first approach, which I guess, for the time last year was needed. He wasn't really ready to play last year, I don't think, but now we are seeing someone more rounded in his game and more ready to play. This guy, another one who genuinely might be playing round 1, and if he does, I mean, it's Nick Watson or Jack Ginnivan, isn't it? And finally, someone that we really just got to spend time talking about, Lachlan Blakiston. So last week against Toby Nankervis, it was really hard to judge his performance. He obviously dominated the game a bit last week in the midfield and really gave our midfield the upper hand a lot of the time, but I was unsure how much to read into that because I just... not to be rude, but I don't rate Toby Nankervis as a ruckman anymore. I think the game might have gone past him a little bit. The test was always going to be how he goes against the better rucks in the comp. And St. Kilda have 2 of the better rucks in the comp with De Koning and Rowan Marshall. So this game, it was really Lachlan Blakiston versus Tom De Koning for pretty much all of it. And that first quarter was really, that was something. That was really exciting. Blakiston towelled him up a little bit, honestly, to start the game. And look, to be fair, De Koning worked his way into the game and was one of the better players to end it and got the upper hand by the end of the game. But the fact it was an even contest for most of it, and also, at times Blakiston beating him in the contest, that is very impressive because I didn't think that'd be the case. I was worried that, if anything, Blakiston would really struggle against De Koning and these ruckmen. So the fact he's keeping up and matching with De Koning and able to beat him at times is absolutely fantastic. He had the 16 disposals, 21 hitouts, 6 tackles, and some of those rundown tackles, there was one early in the game where I think there were 2 holding the ball tackles. One of them was on Nasiah Wangadin Miller of all people. So this guy not only works his way into the ruck, he has unreal field coverage, but also has that defensive intent as well that you need from players, but just ruckman. The fact that you can have a ruckman, a player that can often be a bit useless in open play in some teams' cases, but Lachie Blakiston is not useless. He works so hard for his team. He was sitting back defensively while Peter Wright was rucking up the field. Yeah, this is a really impressive performance. He rucked out most of the game, tied a bit as the game went on, so we'll see what that looks like. But, early signs this preseason are really, really good. Keep in mind, this is his second game in the AFL, not even the AFL, but in the ruck. He rucked last week against Nankervis, this week against De Koning, and he's looked really good in both these games. It might change in the regular season. We don't know how he's going to go against guys like Meek and Reeves, but the fact you've got someone who can ruck while Nick Bryan is injured, you've also got someone who can plug a hole in defence as that ruckman. I think Blakiston, the fact he's played as a defender to start his career last year, really helps us because he's got that defensive, nous, but also chemistry with his teammates back there. That is a bonus to have, and to be honest, of all the rucks we have right now, he's the one that can plug the hole best in D50, which is what you need when you have key defenders missing around the ground. So really, really good signs from Lachie Blakiston. He was definitely one of our better players in that first half. He is having an awesome preseason. But guys, I think that might be that. That is my last player review of the preseason, and now we move on to Hawthorn. The next time I do one of these videos, it is going to be after our thumping win over the Hawthorn Hawks. We'll give player ratings as well in the regular season, so stay tuned for that. I'll have plenty of guests on the channel to be involved in these player ratings videos. Again, if you've got anyone that you think would be great in these videos, let me know in the comments below and I will try and get in touch with them. But guys, that is all for now. Preseason done and dusted. We look forward to the Hawthorn game. That is a big one to look forward to. Until then, make sure you like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel if you happen to be new, and as always, go Bombers.